Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President?
All right, Senators, we have someone that is not a stranger to this chamber, Pastor Greg St. Cyr from Bay Area Christian Community in Annapolis, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 31st District. Please rise for the invocation.
Thank you. Well, what a joy. I say this sincerely. What a great joy for me to be with you today. Thank you, Senator Simon Ayer, for the privilege. And thinking about what to pray about, I thought of a psalm, Psalm 32, verse 8, which has always helped me make decisions. Does anybody here need wisdom in making decisions? Psalm 32, 8 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way which you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Let's pray together. We come to you this morning, Lord, reminding ourselves that your eye is upon us, and you are a God who sees. You see the challenges before us, the challenge of the bills on our desks, the pressure of what seems like too little time and too many appointments, the difficulty of speaking our convictions with kindness and love to those who disagree. You are aware of the needs of our family, friends, and constituents. You see the health challenges that many of us face. Who is sufficient for the tasks before us? Only you. We gain encouragement this morning knowing that your eye is upon us. And you say, I will. I will instruct you. I will teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you. With these words, we begin our day with a heart at peace and trusting in you. And all God's people said, Amen, amen, amen.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Mr. President.
Chair, recognizes the senator from the 31st District.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have Pastor St. Cyr down here. He's a wonderful person. He's got a growing church. And one of the reasons it's growing is because they just love the Lord and show that love to people. So I'd ask you to journalize the prayer.
Most certainly. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your invocation this morning. And without objection, we will journalize the invocation this morning. Has everyone recorded their presence? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. With 41 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. If we could, okay, it looks like we do have our guest. Chair recognizes the senator from the 30th District. We have a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today is Maryland Library Community Day. I'm thrilled to have two guests on the floor this morning to help celebrate. We've had a couple conversations about libraries this session. I think we're going to have a couple more, but I want to take a moment to make sure that we are recognizing not just the spaces of our libraries, but the people who work in them. And so, Mr. President, today we are celebrating the hard work and commitment of our library staff to our communities. Libraries, as we all know, are kind of the last third spaces left in our communities that people can come at no cost to read a book, to write a resume, to get help with grant writing, to take advantage of 3D printers. And all of that innovation is led by our talented librarians and library support staff. So, Mr. President, if the resolution could be read across the desk, I would appreciate it.
The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Maryland Library Community in recognition of the 2024 Maryland Library Day, which acknowledges the innovative services provided by all Maryland libraries and the broad-based community support they enjoy. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 13th day of February, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the wonderful librarians and library community, we welcome you on this 2024 Maryland Library Day. The Senate of Maryland unanimously says thank you and congratulations on your wonderful service. Thank you very much. please make sure to pass along. My mother-in-law is a librarian. So just, pass that along, that we are so thankful for all of our librarians. That's right. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Other guests today. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we all know, our staff is very important to us. And if it wasn't for our staff, I've said it before, where would we be today? And I wanted to emphasize not just my chief of staff, which is important to me, but others that work with me also. And I would love the Senate to give a warm, happy, clapping celebration to my friend. Here he is. He's a good hard worker. Jarrett Harsack. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Senator from District 30.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today in the gallery we have 16 students, and I think they win the award for furthest travel to visit us today. 16 students from the College Ghent in Wales, the United Kingdom. They're here to learn about our democracy and experience some Maryland culture. And one student asked me about the genesis of our flag, because apparently it is world renowned. So if you please join me in giving a warm Senate welcome to the 16 students from Wales.
Welcome. I will say that Maryland flag is the top, but the second probably is the Welsh flag. It's a pretty awesome one. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us, and hope you learn a little bit about American democracy today. Excellent. Welcome. All right. Let's see. We have Senator from District 11. Don't know if they're here yet, actually, so maybe let's hold for a minute. Senator from District 29, St. Mary's. Do we have a guest today? No? All right. Well, maybe we'll introduce when we get the chance. If Roland Park gets here, we'll call them at that point. Any further introductions? If not, let's go ahead and waive the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We've got a fair amount of second readers today, so we'll just plow on through. Let's start with introduction of additional bills, calendar number 39. Clerk will read the bills.
Senate Bill 1119, Senator Sidnor, Baltimore County Property Taxes Authority to set a special rate for vacant and abandoned property, rules.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They'll be referred to the Rules Committee. We've got Senate bond initiatives, calendar number 27. Clerk will read the bond initiatives.
Number 1, Senator Waldstreicher, Roundhouse Theater, Budget and Taxation. Number 2, Senator Reedy, Beehive Handicap Flooring Project, Budget and Taxation.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bond initiatives. They will be referred to the Capital Budget Subcommittee. We have a report from the Committee on Finance. This is report number 4. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 109, Senator Guile, State Employees Parental Bereavement Leave, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 109 establishes parental bereavement leave with pay for all state employees in all 3 branches of state government. The leave may be used by a state employee only after notifying the employee's appointing authority, and the appointing authority may not require the employee to use any other paid leave first. The amendment alters the amount of leave available by authorizing up to 10 days of bereavement leave following the death of a child between 6 months and up to 27 years of age, and authorizing up to 60 days of bereavement leave following the death of an infant under the age of 6 months or following a stillbirth. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 109 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 133, Senator Clausmeyer, State Employees' Rights and Protections, Personal Actions and Harassment, Investigation of Complaints, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 133 extends the time for an investigation to be conducted and a written decision issued from 30 days to 60 days after a complaint alleging harassment or discrimination is received from a state employee or an applicant for the employment. The time may be extended an additional 30 days if complainant grants written authorization to the EEO officer conducting the investigation. The bill alters the law to conform with the time it is taking to investigate these complaints. Amendment number 1 is technical, and amendment number 2 specifies the time a state appointing authority may begin a disciplinary action following the decision of an investigation alleging discrimination or harassment. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 133 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 144, Senator Heddleman, medical records, fees, attorneys representing patients, favorable.
And before we get here, just for our friends visiting us from Wales, we don't have too much debate on a number of these. We may have a couple down here, but these are still early in session, so these are a lot of kind of more of our routine bills. Well, maybe not, we'll see. But for the most part, it may seem quiet, but it's because we're moving through the non-controversial stuff first. So, Chair recognizes the senator from District 33.
Now you jinxed me, Mr. President. Senate Bill 144 prohibits a healthcare provider or a representative of the healthcare provider from charging a fee for providing copies of a medical record requested by an attorney representing the patient in appealing a denial of Social Security, disability income, or Social Security benefits. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 144 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 209, Chair, Finance Committee, Economic Development, Maryland Economic Development Commission, alterations, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 28th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 209 is a departmental bill that alters administrative requirements related to the Maryland Economic Development Commission. The bill requires the commission to include at least 1 representative from the life sciences industry and 1 representative from the manufacturing industry among its members. It also alters requirements related to certain reports and strategic plans. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, and there was no opposition at the committee hearing. Therefore, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 209 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Senators, before, just if we could give a warm senator, our doctor of the day has a practice in Millersville as a rheumatologist, but lives in the 46th district. So Dr. Erin Murray, thank you and welcome to the Senate today. Thanks for being here. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 214, Chair, Finance Committee, Maryland Military Installation Council, membership, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 214 is a departmental bill that increases the membership of the Maryland Military Installation Council by adding the Secretary of Labor, the State Superintendent of Schools, and a spouse of a service member, and also updates obsolete references. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objections, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 214 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 232, Chair, Finance Committee, Public Employees Relations Act, alterations, favorable.
Recognize the senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 232 is a departmental bill that alters provisions of last year's Public Employee Relations Act by defining the term interested employee organization to include both an employee organization representing employees in a bargaining unit or a petitioner who has met a showing of interest requirement for the purpose of conducting elections for exclusive representatives. The bill makes other corrective changes, including altering the timing of exclusive representative access to new employees, clarifying the responsibilities of deputy directors, and the process for investigations. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 232 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 242, Chair, Finance Committee, State Board of Social Work Examiners, Sunset Extension, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the minority whip as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 242 is a departmental bill that extends the termination date for the State Board of Social Work Examiners by 3 years from July 1st, 2028. There are 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 makes a change to the purpose paragraph. And amendment number 2, because we'd had some concerns that had been expressed by some different members from constituents, we do have an amendment that requires the State Board of Social Work Examiners, who has a new executive director coming on board and some changes being made, which we think are going to be good, but we are asking them to report some information related to the time the board requires to issue license, investigate complaints, and open and examine applications. We're requiring them to report back to us by December 1. So with those 2 amendments, there is no fiscal impact and no opposition at the committee hearing. So I would move the amendments, Mr. President, and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 242 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 336, Senator Klossmeyer, Insurance Producer Licensing Requirements, Education Experience, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 336 repeals certain education and experience requirements necessary for an individual to obtain an insurance producer license from the Maryland Insurance Administration. Specifically, the bill removes the requirement that an individual take a pre-licensing course and work for at least 1 year prior to the applying for a license. Amendment number 1 makes changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 keeps in place a pre-licensure education requirement applicable to applicants for a license to act as an insurance producer for limited line credit insurance, and there was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 336 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Before we go to the next one, Senator from District 40 has a guest in the gallery, I believe.
Got you. Thank you, Mr. President. Heidi Daniels is up in the balcony behind you, Mr. President. You know, Heidi Daniels heads the Enoch Pratt Library here in Maryland. Next week is her last week.
She's leaving us.
Here with us in the state of Maryland, and she's going out with a bang. She's going to have Billy D. Williams at the Enoch Pratt Library next week on her last week. But she's been a tremendous asset to us in Baltimore City and throughout the state of Maryland. Dear friend and a constituent of ours. And she's joined by her colleagues from the Enoch Pratt. Would you guys stand with her? Colleagues, please join me in giving a warm Senate welcome to Heidi Daniels and our colleagues from Enoch Pratt.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to miss Ms. Daniels quite a bit. Send her best. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 358, Senator McCray, Economic Development, Maryland Technology Development Corporation Applications and Reporting Requirements, favorable.
Recognizing Senator from District 40 as the floor leader.
Gotcha, that came up pretty quick. Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 358 requires the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, which we also refer to often as TECO, to include an option for an applicant to provide specified demographic information on an investment application. TEDCO may not take any adverse action against an applicant who declines to provide the information, and the applicant must include a statement that the information is voluntary but encouraged. Beginning October 1st, 2024, and annually thereafter, TEDCO must report to the governor, the Maryland Economic Development Commission, and the General Assembly specified information related to the corporation's investment, and if available, provide related de-identified and disaggregated demographic information. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 358 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's move over to Education, Energy, and the Environment. This is report number 6. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 27, Senator Guile, Cosmetology Licensure Compact, favorable.
Recognize the Vice Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is part of the package of bills that's going to support our veterans' families, which is one of this administration's top priorities. With this bill, we're going to make it easier for spouses of veterans who are relocating, maybe every 2 to 3 years, to get jobs, continue their profession in Maryland. It requires that at least 7 states join the interstate compact. Right now, 3 have already joined, and there are a dozen that have legislation pending. There would be sharing data, make sure there's background checks. This is a great bill that was endorsed by the Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Labor, and one other department. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 27 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 33, Senator Rosapep, More Opportunities for Career-Focused Students, Act of 2024, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognize the senator from the 8th District as a floor leader. 9th District as a floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 33 passed this chamber unanimously last year. The bill generally requires local school systems to assist high school students in preparing for admission to registered apprenticeship programs in a manner similar to how they assist students in preparing for admission to post-secondary institutions. There is 1 committee amendment that adds co-sponsors. I move the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 33 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 205, Senator Hayes, University Systems of Maryland Board of Regents membership, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from Prince George as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill requires the governor, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House to ensure that 1 member of the Board of Regents of the University System of Maryland is a graduate of a historically black college or university. This requirement only applies after the next vacancy on the board that occurs after July 1st, 2024. There are 2 committee amendments. The first is technical. The second amendment requires that 1 member be a graduate of an HBCU in the University System of Maryland instead of the state. There is no fiscal impacts. I move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 205 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 255, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Public Safety, Volunteer Company Assistance Fund, alterations, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 35th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This departmental bill transfers the Volunteer Company Assistance Fund from the Military Department to the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. So what this does is codifies existing practice. There were no amendments. I'd like to move for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 255 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 297, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment, State Board for Professional Engineers, Engineer Members, Qualifications, favorable with one amendment.
Recognized Senator from Prince George as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this departmental bill reduces the number of years from 12 to 5 that an engineer member of the State Board of Professional Engineers must have practice engineering. The committee amendment, there is one committee amendment. The amendment reduces the number of years that an engineer member must have practice engineering from 12 to 10 instead of from 12 to 5. I move adoption of the one committee amendment in the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 297 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 309, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Sustainable Growth, Subcabinet, and Repeal of Office of Smart Growth, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Frederick City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, you may recall that the Office of Smart Growth was established in 1997. And over the past 27 years, the mission and the scope of that office has evolved. Therefore, what this bill does is reorganize and rename the department to the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet. There are no amendments. It was approved unanimously, and therefore I move the adoption of the favorable committee report. Thank you.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 309 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 444, Senator Zucker, Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, Student Information, United States Census Bureau, favorable.
Recognize the senator from Frederick as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this bill does is it takes our existing longitudinal data system center, and it allows the Department of the U.S. Census Bureau to access that data for the same analytical and research purposes as currently exist today. There are no amendments. It was voted unanimously. Therefore, I move for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 444 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to, stay with Tripoli, and we've got report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 115, Senator Kagan, Election Law, Recounts, Procedures, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, 2 years ago, we passed a bill on recounts that was about who's eligible to do it and who would pay for it. Last year, we unanimously passed a version very similar to this that just talks about the process. Our law books are out of date in terms of the options of how a close election can be recounted, and this is just locking it in. There are 2 amendments, and I just want to describe them. One of the first one is technical, but the second one talks about internet-delivered ballots, which more and more of your constituents are using. It is complicated, it is challenging, and it is expensive, but the reality is that it's here to stay. So when someone asks for an internet-delivered ballot, which we really hope they won't do, but if they do, they print it out on their home printer. That means that they have a home printer, that means that they have toner cartridge in it, that means they've got paper, that means they have a number 10 envelope, and they make their selections. This piece of paper cannot be scanned. So it has to be manually duplicated into something that roughly looks like our home crafts project. It's thicker paper, it has coating on it, and it can go through the scanner to be counted, which your home paper cannot do. Bipartisan teams are coordinating all this. They have to be paid. That's why it's expensive. It's time consuming. And so that's why it takes longer to certify our elections, is because we have to deal with an increasing number of internet delivered ballots. So what does that mean during a recount? So 99.99% of the time, these bipartisan teams transfer the information from your constituent's ballot from this piece of paper to a ballot that can be scanned, and they do it accurately. They check each other's work, and they virtually never get it wrong. But in a recount, the amendment just clarifies what happens in a recount. And we want to make sure that we keep the original ballot and the duplicated ballot stored together if there's a recount, so that the boards of elections, the local boards of elections, can verify that the voter intent was duplicated accurately, and if there's a difference, it would be adjudicated and moved forward into the process. We have had close elections in recent years. We want to make sure the details are right, and so I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if I could ask the floor leader to yield
Will
for
the floor leader
question.
yield? Senator may
Of
proceed.
course.
You described that very well, and I happened to have the opportunity in the last election. We had a very close local election in my county, and I went and watched the teams, which was great, and they were all being very diligent, doing a good job. I did wonder at times if just mistake might happen. So I think this is a good amendment, but just so I'm clear, you're storing the internet mailed, it's probably not, I don't want to say it the wrong way. The ballot that was printed off from the internet, mailed in, our teams have to, in a very bipartisan way, look at it carefully, which was good to watch the process. It's an open public process. Anybody can walk in and observe. And then the 2 things are stored together until we're done certifying the election, correct?
That's precisely right.
Okay. Can I ask a broader question? Why are we doing this internet thing? My understanding is that states, a lot of states are not doing this. And this is not like conspiracy theory radio here. I think it's kind of not good. I mean, it seems like it's overly cumbersome when there might be a better way to get ballots to people, even if it costs more to mail it to them. It just seems like the whole process is fraught with a lot of problems, especially if you had a county that had trouble getting enough bipartisan teams or what have you. Could we entertain an opportunity to maybe change this in the future? I know that it's not this bill, but.
It's a great question, and I agree with you in concept. And I actually have a bill that's coming before our committee soon, I think next week, that would do a study on this, because it is a problem, and to use your words, it is fraught with challenges. I pushed really hard to have the Board of Elections even say preferred in terms of vote by mail. That is a preferred method because there is no duplication of a ballot that's needed. Here's the thing. Grandma gets sick, is in the hospital, and you have to fly to Dubuque, and you were going to go and early vote or go to Election Day and vote. So it may be that this is your only option. God forbid, someone's in the hospital, they want to vote. There are sometimes, and then of course, there are people who are abroad, and those serving our countries, our veterans. Sometimes this is the best way for them to vote because a mail-delivered ballot doesn't always get there in time. So we do need some exceptions. We do need it. In my personal opinion, I do agree with you that the increased demand for these is problematic. As I said, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it requires a lot of staff that have to be paid, and they are humans. And while they do get it right, almost all the time, there can be errors. There was one more thing.
If I could interject while you're just to follow up and because I think we're in a lot of agreement here. The challenge too, I look at the election system and say, what can we do to remove opportunities for people to feel like it's not on the up and up or secure or whatever? And you brought up why we need some of these internet options, and I think for overseas military ballots, a great example. I don't think anybody would have a question about that. I almost wonder if, and this is again probably not this bill, but I almost wonder if maybe we could look at something where you need to the old days you had to give a reason why you need an absentee, and we've gone away with that, which is fine, but maybe a way to say you kind of need a reason for why you're asking for the internet ballot. Because I'm going to tell you, it took our local election board in Carroll County a long time to count these ballots, and that was in a midterm election with lower turnout that we're going to have this fall. And we, so I think I've made my point, but I appreciate your response.
And I totally agree with your point. I think we're aligned on this. One of the problems, Senator and colleagues, is that people are used to shopping online, banking online, even dating online. So they say, yeah, I'll just vote online. And what they think is they're going to be sent a ballot and they're going to be able to click, click, click and push send. That would be supremely insecure, and that would be dangerous. So hopefully that's not the way we're going anytime soon, because NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, in my district, has raised a lot of cautions on that. So a lot of our constituents don't understand the burden on them with having a printer and toner cartridge and all the things I said before, but they seriously don't understand the burden on our local boards of elections in terms of time and money. And we're going to have problems certifying our elections in a timely way when we get increasing volumes of these. So in the meantime, this is an emergency bill to make sure that these ballots can all be counted and stored together, as the good senator from District 5 said, and that's why this bill is needed. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections to the committee amendments? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections to the amended report? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 115 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 291, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, persons doing public business disclosure requirements, favorable.
Recognizing the President Pro Tem as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This departmental bill repeals provisions under the State Finance and Procurement article that require a business that enters into contracts, leases, or other agreements with the state totaling $200,000 or more in a calendar year to disclose to the Secretary of State specified information, including, if known, each person who has beneficial ownership of the business. Correspondingly, the bill makes changes to Title 14 of the Election Law article, including requiring a person that does public business with the state or a local government to file a registration statement with the State Board of Elections that includes, if known, each person who has beneficial ownership of the business entity. There were no committee amendments, no fiscal impact. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Oh, yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Baltimore County on the report.
Thank you very much. If I might ask the floor leader
Will Senator
question.
yield? Senator may proceed.
Just curious, the reason for the repeal?
I think it was just moving it from the state procurement article into the State Board of Elections, the elections article.
Okay, so it's not repealed, it's, the requirement will still be.
Yeah, right. It's just moving where the requirement is, so there's like more disclosure within the Board of Elections, though.
Thank you very
article.
much.
All right. Any further discussion on the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 291 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 372, Senator Feldman, Election Law Deadline for Selection of Lieutenant Government, favorable with one amendment. This is a constitutional amendment.
Recognizing the chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 372 proposes a constitutional amendment relating to when a candidate for governor picks his or her lieutenant governor running mate. Basically, instead of requiring the candidate to designate the lieutenant governor a running mate when the candidate files for office, under this bill, and again, that's prior to the primary election, this would instead move that designation to after the primary election to a date certain. This is a constitutional amendment. It'll be on the ballot if we pass this legislation on the ballot this November, and if it passes, it would apply to the 2026 election, again, if the voters of Maryland vote yes. But before getting to the bill specifics, if you might indulge me, because we don't have that many constitutional amendments on the floor, and a little history here I think would be helpful. So just a little Maryland history. 1867, colleagues, is when we ratified the current version of the Maryland Constitution, and at that time, in 1867, we had no lieutenant governor. There was no lieutenant governor at that time. From 1867 to 1970, we had no lieutenant governor here in the state of Maryland. So what happened was in 1968, then Governor Spiro Agnew was selected by Richard Nixon to be his running mate. And as a result of that, they won the election. We had a vacancy in the governorship. And the way we did it back then in Maryland, it was similar to how we do state treasurer. We had a joint session of the House and Senate, and we came and we actually elected Governor Mandel to be the next governor of the state of Maryland. So as a result of that, that sequence, decision was made, yes, it would be good to have the office of lieutenant governor in the case of a future vacancy. So in November 1970, the Constitution was amended to create the office of lieutenant governor, and that's how we are today. Now, under the current system, from 1970 till now, when somebody's running for governor, they select their lieutenant governor running mate, again, prior to the primary, and I see our former Attorney General walk in here trying to amend the state constitution. And so that the system is, again, since that time, the selection's made in the primary, which oftentimes can be literally, this is before the primary election is decided, unlike the federal system where, of course, a president gets elected in the primary, and then at the convention this year, it'll be July or even August of this year before that presidential nominee selects his or her running mate. So, that's how it's done there. Now, how do other states handle this? We have a variation around the country. Some states don't have lieutenant governors at all. Other states elect lieutenant governors and governors separately. You can even be like Virginia. It could be a separate party. Some have separate runs for lieutenant governor, and then they come together after the primary and form a ticket. There's all kinds of variations, but here's what's salient, Mr. President, about our system. We are one of only 6 states in the nation currently that do it the way we currently do it. And that's the backdrop. So what 372 does, it simply matches us to how it's currently done at the federal level with the president, vice president, and how many other states do it. You pick your running mate after you've won the nomination. I would note we have one amendment, and the bill as introduced said that you had till 21 days after the primary election to select your lieutenant governor. The one amendment, because we have recounts, overseas ballots, and the like, it was suggested that the deadline for designating your lieutenant governor be after the certification of the primary election. So that one amendment takes us to a spot 2 days after the certification of the election. In 2022, it actually took 4 weeks to certify the primary election. So there's a fairly large window between primary election day and certification. And that's what the amendment does, the single amendment. Before I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report and that amendment, if I might just outline 3 quick arguments, we can frame the issue if there's some discussion here or even on third reader about the rationale for doing it now. And it revolves, I would say, around the basic proposition that we want to have as broad a pool of potential lieutenant governors as possible. This is very bipartisan, and I think when you have a larger pool in the current system, you yield the strongest possible tickets, arguably on both sides of the aisle. And so here's 3 arguments, and then I'm going to rest. First of all, under the current system, you cannot pick, if you're running for governor, and we had in 2022, 10 people running on the Democratic side, 4 on the Republican side. You cannot pick one of your opponents to be one of your running mates. And for my Republican colleagues, when you think of the presidential level, whether it was Ronald Reagan picking George Bush, who was number 2 in the primary, or actually we had a Lincoln Day address last night. If you go back to President Lincoln, he pretty much took all his opponents in the presidential primary back in the 1860s and put them all into his cabinet. And in fact, there's a book called Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, which talks about that. So under our current system, you basically have to persuade one of your opponents to give up or drop out of the race in order for them to be eligible to be on be your running mate, which again is, back to this point, unnecessarily or for no particular reason, limiting the pool of potential running mates. The second argument I would say has to do with we have hundreds and hundreds of elected officials around the state who run on the same cycle as the governor. And if you think about it, for the most part, if you are anybody in the state of Maryland, county council, House of Delegates, Senate, wherever, are asked to be a running mate during the primary, when there are 10 people running, you're faced with a very difficult decision. You basically have to, if you accept, you're going to have to give up your seat. You basically cannot be running for re-election to your seat. Again, no particularly compelling reason to limit the pool in that way. So that's number two, it's limiting. And then finally, politically, Mr. President, I would suggest that having a system whereby you are required to pick your running mate a year or longer before the general election makes no sense. You don't even know who your general election opponent is. And you'll see this year or in the past with president and vice president, a lot of time and thought it goes into politically what makes the best matchup given the general election candidate. And so under the current system, you don't even know who your general election opponent is. So those are three arguments. There are others, Mr. President, as to why this constitutional amendment makes sense. And as I said earlier, and I'll just, one final thing, this piece of legislation did pass the House of Delegates in both 2021 and 2022. It stalled over here. But this year, in our committee, the Triple E committee, it passed on a bipartisan basis, 10-1. Again, with that, it's time to make the change. And I'd like to move the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Very briefly, Mr. Chair, nothing prevents a lieutenant governor from, or a governor candidate from announcing ahead of time. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, you can make that if you think, but the point is when we get to the primary ballot, the actual ballot, only the gubernatorial candidate will be deemed official on the ballot. But you can obviously say that this is who you will pick after the primary election and you've been selected. So no, there's nothing that prohibits you from campaigning, but on the ballot itself, and actually in the bill specifically says on the primary election ballot, only the gubernatorial candidate will appear.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. On the amendment, any discussion on the amendment, the committee amendment? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 372 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Chair recognizes the Chair of Judicial Proceedings Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The chairman acknowledges his presence already, but I wanted to do so formally. Former delegate, former senator, the 48th chairman of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, and two-term Attorney General, the distinguished Brian Frosch. Welcome to the floor.
Welcome, welcome. Always part of the family, always part of the family. Great to see you. All right, let's see, we are on, I think that does it for that report. Let's go to report number 8 out of Triple E. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 20, Senator Simon Eyre, Environment, Cox Creek Citizens Oversight Committee, membership favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 20 alters the membership of the Cox Creek Citizens Oversight Committee. It also clarifies the authority of the commission. There was no opposition. There was 2 amendments as described. But, Mr. President, I would like to frame this with 5 detailed points before we go on. No, actually, I'm just going to move the amendments in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objections, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 20 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 207, Senator Bailey, Natural Resources, Northern Snakehead, common name, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 38th District as the floor leader.
Good morning, Mr. President and friends and colleagues. Senate Bill 207, this marketing bill, as introduced, establishes the common name of the northern snakehead as the Patuxent fish. However, there are two amendments. Amendment 1 is technical and it adds a co-sponsor. But Amendment 2 alters the common name of the northern snakehead to be the Chesapeake chana, which is also the scientific name, and it is how it is being marketed at businesses like Wegmans and Whole Foods. So I move these two amendments, and I ask for a favorable committee report.
Not the Patuxent, the Chesapeake. Very good. All right. Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title or a new name? Hearing none, Senate Bill 207 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 281, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Natural Resources, Submerged Aquatic Vegetation, Alteration or Removal Requirements, favorable.
Recognized Senator from Baltimore City and County is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 281 modifies the requirements surrounding submerged aquatic vegetation. The intention of this departmental bill is to strengthen the criteria for the alteration or removal of submerged aquatic vegetation. Specifically, it requires, rather than encourages, notification to the Department of Natural Resources when any submerged aquatic vegetation, say that 3 times quickly, or removal is proposed. It lessens the width of the allowable removal of vegetation from 60 to 20 feet. This would also apply to public utilities, telecommunications, marinas, and property owners. It also lowers the threshold, and it will better align with other boating and vegetation practices. It expands the protections of submerged aquatic vegetation from just the Chesapeake Bay to all aquatic waters of the state. For example, our Atlantic coastal bays. It also allows for the trimming rather than only the fully cutting or removal of vegetation. So that would allow for regrowth and for the roots to develop. The vote was passed unanimously favorable. There are no committee amendments. I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 281 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 284, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Natural Resources, Sale, Barter, or Exchange of Mountain Specimens from Decedent's Estate, favorable.
Interesting. All right, Chair recognizes the Vice Chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Happy Mardi Gras, you guys. Today seemed like a good day for fun and merriment. Taxidermy is not something we discuss very often in this chamber. So I ask you, dear colleagues, I don't want to be a bore, and I hope you'll bear with me while I talk about this bill. I'm going to be mounting an effective defense of the bill, I hope. Now, don't have a cow, because the chair pigged me to present this bill. So far I know, you'd have to hunt for opposition to this legislation. It's not stuffed with extraneous details, and it's a stretch to say that there's not a lot of miscellaneous provisions. There's no snake in the text, which is why we voted for it unanimously. I'm not lying when I say that I wouldn't steer you wrong on this bill. I hope you will emulate me when I vote green on this bill. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the Senator from District 7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the floor leader yield for a question?
Senator may proceed.
Of course.
So what's the bill do?
That was harder to, so I can say.
It's a fair question, Senator.
It's
Thank
a
you
fair
for asking.
question. It's not a trophy bill, and I'm sticking to my guns. So this just means if Grandpa dies and the kids don't want the stuffed bear head Right now, there are very few organizations that will accept the donation, and so it ends up in the trash because we don't want to create an economy and encourage more hunting just to make money. It's going to be able to be liquidated as part of the estate and either sold or donated.
Okay, so
It's
is
a
that
really simple bill.
currently they can't do that, or is this just
Correct.
So you can't give a deer head.
Nope.
You can't pass it down, or not pass it, but I guess sell it.
You
with
can
the
pass
estate.
it down right now, but if
Can't
none of
sell.
the decedents, if nobody,
Okay.
if no one wants it, it ends up in the trash, which is kind of,
Thank you for the clarification.
yep.
Excellent. All right. On the report, any further discussion? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 284 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 325, Senator Brooks, Maryland Paint Stewardship, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 325 requires producer of architectural paint sold at retail in the state or a representative organization acting on behalf of a producer to submit a plan for the establishment of a paint stewardship program to the Department of the Environment for approval. The bill establishes an implementation timeline and requirements, as well as an annual reporting requirements for producers or representative organizations. The bill also requires the payment of a plan review fee and annual report review fee to the department. Finally, the bill establishes a uniform paint stewardship assessment to cover program cost and a prohibition of sale of architectural paint unless the producers or its representative organization is implementing an approval paint stewardship program. The fiscal impact is minimal. There are no committee amendments. And Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much. If I might ask a question.
Will the floor leader yield?
Yes.
Senator may proceed.
Is this the same bill in the same posture that we passed last session?
That it is.
Thank you very much. Sure.
All right. Chair recognizes the Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I give the Inspector a year for a question, please?
Yes, go right ahead,
Senator may
sir.
proceed.
Thank you, sir. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Thank you. I think it's important to have a plan for the plan stewardship plan with MDE. It makes a good statement, but I think one of the problems that I do have with it is fees. And I see there's two of them. There's a plan review fee and a reporting fee. And just knowing that, having a problem with maybe some of our businesses that might have a problem with that. Was there another way looking into this, see that those fees couldn't be at the time?
Yeah, well, the fees that's going to be assessed here, you're talking about the fees will probably be less than $1, between 30 cents to $1, you know, per size of the container, which would be anywhere from 5 gallons or less, you know. The Maryland Department of Environment will be looking at that. They got to submit a report to the governor, to Triple E and ENT by December 31, December 1, I'm sorry, of 2028.
Right.
And then any amounts they feel are excessive, they will adjust accordingly. So make sure that all of the funds that are collected for this are going toward the program and the stewardship and the auditing.
Is that fee already in place, or is that judgment with MDE?
MDE will make the make the calculations on that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to special order it. I'm working on an amendment, if that's okay, Mr. President.
All right, senators, move to special order the bill.
That's fine,
Mr. Early.
Mr.
All right, no
President.
objections from the floor leader. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, the bill will be special ordered at the appropriate time tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 337, Senator Feldman, Environment Commission on Climate Change Membership Addition, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill adds the chair of the Public Service Commission or the chair's designee to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. There's 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical and adds co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 adds the Secretary of Emergency Management or the Secretary's designee as a member of the commission. No fiscal note, no opposition. The bill passed unanimously out of the committee. I would move the adoption of the favorable committee report with those 2 committee amendments.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 337 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. All right, Madam Clerk, can we hit the bells very quickly, and if we could do a quorum call before the 3rd reading calendar?
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? Senator from 27th. Excellent. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. This is 3rd reading calendar number 11. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 159, Senator Guile, Courts, Military Records, Recordation, and Inspection.
Senate Bill 159 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 159 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 169, Senator Kagan, Green and Renewable Energy for Nonprofit Organizations Loan Program and Fund.
Senate Bill 169 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 169 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 321, Senator Jackson, Property Tax Credit for Hotel or Residential Development Projects.
Senate Bill 321 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 321 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 414, Senator Zucker, Education Maryland Council on Economic Education Funding.
Senate Bill 414 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 414 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 437, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Contracts and Purchasing.
Senate Bill 437 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 437 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 530, Cecil County Senators, Cecil County Annual Financial Report, filing date.
Senate Bill 530 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 530 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Senators, the desk is clear for the day. We got through that pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and hear from committees. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance will meet at 1 o'clock for 10 bill hearings, 100 witnesses, followed by voting.
Ooh, all right. Busy day. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. EEE Committee will meet at 1 p.m. We've got also 10 bill hearings.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. 1 o'clock, we have full committee budget hearings, followed by voting, followed by capital budget.
All right. Busy day, too. Chair of judicial proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet directly after floor for a voting session, followed by bill hearings. We have 15 bills on the docket, 77 witnesses.
All right. Long day for judicial proceedings. Additional standing committees, select committees, joint committees, caucuses. All right. Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow we have our Bible study at 8 o'clock in the Nail Room. It is Valentine's Day, but it's also Ash Wednesday. So if you'd like to come out tomorrow, we will be giving ashes, but we'll have a good time with that. And Mr. President, if I could, at times, you know, one thing I love to do is I love to pray. I love to start my day with prayer. And I just want to say that at times maybe there's somebody that's not here, and we don't know why they're here. They're not here. But if we could maybe throughout the day take a moment of prayer, maybe pray for that some person that's not here today. Just give them a moment. And I want to let you all know that I pray for you every day. It's important that we have prayer in our life. So I want to let you know that. I pray for you, and I pray for you and your families and for their safety. And it's important to all of us that we pray for each another. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I hope the Senator prays for JPR because we've got a lot of work today. But we've had a busy couple of weeks, and we're heading into a stretch of busy weeks. So I did want to acknowledge the staff in JPR. I wanted Sandy Pop in particular, who's kept our committee running on track with countless witnesses, bills, schedule changes, policy matters. So just wanted to give her a shout out. Also wanted to make sure that we recognize Donna Falls, Diana Torres, and Carol McDermott, as well as our committee council. We've been doing really great work, working long hours. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge their contributions.
Certainly. Well, thank you. We appreciate them. We are certainly blessed to have great staff. No question. Yes, Chair recognizes the co-chair of the Protocol Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we have a birthday today, so permission to use the senator's name?
Senator may proceed.
If everybody can give a round of applause, wish a very happy birthday to Senator Carrozza. Thank you, Mr. President.
Happy birthday. She brought on her birthday the snow all the way from the shore, across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge just for the snow. Excellent. Very good. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 11.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Tomorrow morning, we will have a Maryland Jewish Legislative Caucus meeting at 8:30 in the Cade Room. Please join us for bagels, and there might even be some pink and red ones for Valentine's Day.
Very good. Oh, it's a Valentine's.
Thank you. We'll have a guest speaker also.
Excellent. Wonderful. Additional announcements? Anything else? Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you. Prince George's County delegation meets immediately after floor tomorrow in the Neal Room. Tomorrow, immediately after floor.
Tomorrow after the floor. Thank you, Senator. Anything else? Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Happy Fat Tuesday to those who will be celebrating. Stay safe, everyone. Ash Wednesday tomorrow. All right. Let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With at least 42 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Wednesday, February 14th at 10 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you tomorrow.